A question about time. Have you ever opened a video to learn English, promised yourself, just 10 minutes, and then somehow lost an entire hour scrolling instead, only to feel more tired, more guilty, and less confident than before? This video is not just about English. It's about why Americans respect time, how I learned that lesson during 4 intense weeks in the United States, and how that single idea quietly changed my love, my marriage, my family life, and the way I finally stopped quitting English. If you've ever felt stuck, slow, or ashamed of your progress, this story is already about you. Now let me ask you something simple, but uncomfortable. When you say you don't have time to practice English, do you really mean time, or do you mean energy, focus, and belief? I used to confuse those things too. Back then, my days felt long, noisy, and strangely empty. I was busy all the time, yet nothing important seemed to move forward. English lessons were always postponed. Love conversations were rushed. Family dinners happened with phones on the table. Time was there, but it leaked through my fingers like water. During my first days in the United States, I didn't notice anything dramatic. No movie-style shock. No big speeches. Just small moments that felt sharp. A bus arriving exactly when the app said it would. A cashier politely closing the register at 9 p.m., not 9:02, not 8:58. A neighbor saying, "Let's talk tomorrow," and actually meaning tomorrow, not sometime later. These moments landed quietly, but my brain felt confused. Like it was walking on a moving sidewalk for the first time. Here's the strange part. Nobody looked stressed. People weren't running. They weren't angry. They just moved with intention. Time wasn't an enemy they were chasing. It was a shared agreement. And if you broke that agreement, you weren't punished, you were simply less trusted. That hit me harder than any rule ever could. Psychologists call this temporal respect, the idea that when someone gives you their time, they're giving you a piece of their life. Neuroscience backs this up in a surprisingly practical way. The human brain builds safety and focus through predictability. When time is respected, the brain relaxes. When time is chaotic, the brain stays in survival mode. And a brain in survival mode cannot learn a new language well. It just can't. It's too busy protecting you from imagined danger. That explained something I had never been able to articulate. Every time I tried to learn English, when I had time, my brain treated it like optional noise. No schedule, no boundary, no respect. Of course I quit. Of course I forgot words. Of course I felt stupid. My brain wasn't broken. My relationship with time was. One evening, during that first week, I showed up 5 minutes late to a casual meeting. Nothing important, I thought. No one yelled. No one shamed me. But the conversation had already started, decisions already made. I wasn't excluded. I was simply behind. And suddenly I understood something deeply American. Respecting time isn't about being polite. It's about not stealing momentum from other people's lives. This is where the English learning quietly enters the story. In the US, people don't say, study harder. They say, what time works for you? Time is the container. Content comes second. Once I began setting small, fixed moments, 15 minutes at the same hour each day, my listening improved without effort. Not faster. Not magically. Just steadily. Like the brain finally trusted me again. There's a reason this works, and it's not motivational nonsense. Research on habit formation shows that consistency at a predictable time strengthens neural pathways faster than long, irregular sessions. Your brain loves rhythm. Americans build their lives around it. Work, love, family, even rest, all placed on the clock, not as a prison, but as a promise. I started noticing how this affected relationships too. When someone in America says, "I'll call you at 7," and they do, your nervous system relaxes. You feel chosen, valued, safe. That feeling is the same feeling your brain needs to absorb a new language. Safety before fluency. Always. So let me turn the question back to you, gently. Do you really want better English? Or do you want permission to keep treating your own time as disposable? Because the two can't coexist for long. The moment you respect your time, your brain changes. Its posture. It sits up. It listens. It stays. This video is not here to pressure you. It's here to offer a quieter challenge. What if learning English wasn't about talent, age, or memory, but about making one small appointment with yourself and actually showing up? Americans don't respect time because they are strict. They respect it because they've learned what happens when you don't. And maybe, just maybe, your English journey doesn't need more effort. It needs a clock, a boundary, and a little self-respect. First weeks in America. In my first week in America, I kept thinking something was wrong with my watch. Everything happened too, on time. Not approximately. Not almost. Exactly. When someone said 10 minutes, they meant 10 minutes. When a meeting ended at 4, people stood up at 4, not 4:05, not after one more story. At first, it felt cold. Mechanical. Like life had been reduced to alarms and calendars. But that was just my old habits panicking. Those early weeks were a blur of small shocks. Nothing dramatic enough to tell friends back home. Yet strong enough to quietly rearrange my thinking. I remember standing outside a coffee shop on my third day, the weather cooler than I expected, the sky wide and pale. I arrived 2 minutes late. The barista smiled, but the line had moved, the rhythm already reset. No one waited. No one blamed me. The world simply continued without adjusting to my delay. That moment felt strangely personal. Back where I came from, time was flexible, emotional, negotiable. In America, time felt neutral. Impartial. It didn't care about my reasons. And that neutrality was unsettling. My brain kept trying to interpret it as rejection, but it wasn't. It was structure. And structure, I would later learn, is one of the main reasons Americans appear calm under pressure. Climate played a role too. Even if I didn't realize it immediately. Mornings were colder, evenings unpredictable. Weather apps were checked like rituals. People planned around forecasts, not hopes. When weather can change fast, time becomes a survival tool. You leave when you say you will, because waiting has consequences. That mentality seeps into everything: work schedules, family routines, even casual conversations. By the end of week 1, my internal clock was exhausted. Not physically, but mentally. My brain was constantly adjusting, recalibrating expectations. Neuroscientists would say I was experiencing cognitive friction, the discomfort that happens when deeply learned habits collide with a new environment. It's the same feeling language learners get when grammar rules don't behave like their native tongue. Confusing, tiring, but incredibly fertile for growth. English entered my life during these moments, not as study, but as necessity. Short phrases. Clear intentions. See you at 6. Let's meet at noon. English sounded different when it carried time inside it. Simpler. Sharper. Less decorative. I wasn't memorizing vocabulary. I was syncing with a tempo. One evening, during my second week, I had dinner with a couple who had been married for over 20 years. They scheduled dinner for 6:30. At 6:25, the table was set. At 6:30, food was served. At 7:15, they cleaned together. At 7:45, they sat quietly, no phones, just tea. It wasn't rigid. It was peaceful. Time wasn't controlling them. It was protecting their attention. That night, something uncomfortable surfaced in me. I realized how often I had used being busy as an excuse to avoid presence. Avoid difficult conversations. Avoid learning English seriously. When time is blurry, responsibility is blurry too. America didn't shame me for that realization. It simply exposed it. By week 3, my body began to adapt. I woke up before my alarm. I felt a strange satisfaction finishing things when I said I would. Dopamine, the brain's reward chemical, spikes not from big achievements, but from kept promises, even small ones. This is well documented in behavioral psychology. Americans unknowingly hack their own motivation systems by respecting time. No inspirational quotes required. My English listening improved during this phase, not because I studied harder, but because I studied at the same time every day. 15 minutes. Same chair. Same window light. The brain loves patterns. Once it trusts the pattern, it releases resistance. Suddenly, English wasn't an intruder. It was part of the day's architecture. There was a moment, near the end of week 4, when I caught myself feeling proud, not of fluency, but of consistency. That was new. Back home, pride came from intensity. In America, it came from reliability. Show up. On time. Again. And again. That repetition built confidence quietly. Without drama. Looking back, those first weeks weren't about culture shock. They were about time shock. America didn't change me by force. It changed me by refusing to bend its clock for my excuses. And strangely, that felt respectful. If you're learning English and feel constantly behind, ask yourself this. Are you fighting the language? Or are you fighting the structure it needs to grow? Because language, like life, doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for presence at a specific time. And once you understand that, the clock stops being an enemy. It becomes a guide. Climate changes everything. If you've never lived through 4 seasons that actually argue with each other, it's hard to understand how climate rewires your relationship with time. In America, weather doesn't politely sit in the background. It interrupts. It negotiates. Sometimes it wins. And during my weeks there, I realized something quietly powerful. Climate trains Americans to respect time long before culture ever does. On my second week, I woke up to sunlight that felt sharp, almost metallic. The temperature app said it would drop 10 degrees by afternoon. People around me adjusted instantly, jackets packed, meetings shifted earlier, errands compressed into smaller windows. No complaining. No drama. Just action. Climate wasn't an excuse. It was information. And time was the tool they used to respond. Your brain reacts to weather faster than logic does. Studies in environmental psychology show that unpredictable climate increases cognitive load. The brain compensates by craving structure. That's why in regions with strong seasonal contrast, people rely more heavily on schedules, forecasts, and time blocks. America, with its extreme regional climates, has built an entire lifestyle around this neurological truth, often without realizing it. In places where winter arrives like a warning instead of a suggestion, you don't get around to things. You plan. You leave early. You finish before the storm. Time becomes survival adjacent. And once that mindset exists, it spreads everywhere: workplaces, relationships, education, even language learning. I felt this most clearly one afternoon when a sudden rainstorm rolled in. Streets emptied. Appointments ended exactly on schedule. No one lingered. The rain wasn't angry. It was efficient. And so were the people responding to it. That's when it hit me. Americans don't fight time because they've learned not to fight nature. They align with it. This alignment changed how I listened to English. Not the words, the pace. Sentences were shorter. Pauses were respected. Conversations had clear beginnings and endings. When weather dictates windows of opportunity, communication becomes precise. English, in this context, isn't decorative. It's functional. And functional language is easier for the brain to absorb. Back home, I used to study English whenever I felt ready. In America, the weather taught me that readiness is unreliable. Conditions matter more than mood. You study when the window is open, not when motivation arrives. That shift alone doubled my consistency. Climate also reshaped how people handled emotions. Cold mornings encouraged efficiency. Warm afternoons invited openness. Evenings were protected. Americans didn't pack everything into one emotional burst. They distributed life across time blocks, much like farmers reading the sky. That distribution reduced burnout. And burnout, as neuroscience confirms, is one of the biggest enemies of language acquisition. There's a reason this matters for you if you're learning English. Your brain doesn't fail because it's weak. It fails because it's overloaded. Climate-aware cultures reduce overload by externalizing decisions into schedules. Less decision fatigue. More energy for learning. More patience for listening. One weekend, I visited a family who lived in a region where weather shifts quickly. Their entire Saturday was mapped loosely around temperature changes. Outdoor tasks first. Quiet indoor time later. English cartoons for the kids at the same hour every week. No arguments. No reminders. The environment did the reminding. This is supported by chronobiology, the science of biological rhythms. Humans learn best when activities align with predictable external cues. Light. Temperature. Time. Americans, shaped by climate necessity, unintentionally create ideal conditions for slow, steady learning, including language learning. My own progress followed this pattern. I began pairing English listening with specific environmental cues. Morning light. Afternoon silence. Evening. Calm. Not long sessions. Just consistent ones. The brain linked English to safety, not struggle. And safety accelerates comprehension far more than effort ever will. Climate also influenced relationships in subtle ways. People respected each other's time, because wasting it could mean facing bad weather unprepared. That respect spilled into love, marriage, and family life. You didn't cancel last minute without reason. You didn't show up late without consequence. Time wasn't moralized. It was practical. That practicality changed how I valued my own learning. English stopped being a hobby. It became part of my daily weather, something I prepared for, adjusted around, and protected. I stopped waiting for perfect conditions. I worked within real ones. So when people ask why Americans respect time so deeply, they often point to productivity or money. But those are surface explanations. Underneath is something older and simpler. When the environment is unpredictable, time becomes your most reliable ally. If you're struggling with English, consider this gently. Your problem might not be discipline. It might be climate, external or internal. Chaos outside creates chaos inside. Structure calms both. America taught me that respecting time isn't about rushing. It's about reading the conditions and moving when the window is open. English, like weather, won't wait for your feelings. But it will reward your timing. And once you learn to listen to that rhythm, progress stops feeling heavy. It starts feeling natural. Culture of punctuality. If you want to understand American culture, don't start with freedom or ambition. Start with the clock. Not the expensive kind on the wall, but the invisible one inside people's heads. In America, punctuality isn't a personality trait. It's a social language. And once you understand that language, a lot of confusing behaviors suddenly make sense, especially when you're learning English and wondering why conversations feel so structured. During my third week, I noticed something subtle but consistent. People didn't apologize emotionally when they were late. They apologized factually. I'm sorry, I'm late by 3 minutes. Not traffic was crazy, not I had a long day. Just the data. Time wasn't a story. It was a measurement. And that difference matters more than it sounds. In many cultures, being late is softened by warmth. In America, warmth comes after respect. First, you protect the other person's time. Then you build closeness. This order felt backwards to me at first. I thought punctuality was cold. But psychology suggests the opposite. Predictability builds trust faster than charm ever could. When your brain knows what to expect, it relaxes. Relaxed brains connect better. That's why Americans often schedule even casual things. Coffee at 10. Call at 7. Dinner at 6:30. It's not rigidity. It's clarity. And clarity lowers anxiety. Studies in social psychology show that uncertainty, especially around time, activates the same brain regions as physical discomfort. So when Americans respect time, they're not being strict. They're being kind to each other's nervous systems. This changed how I experienced English conversations. When start times were clear, my listening improved. I wasn't anxious about when things would end. My brain wasn't scanning for escape routes. It could focus on sounds, rhythm, meaning. Punctuality created a container. Inside that container, language flowed. One afternoon, I joined a small group discussion scheduled for 30 minutes. Exactly 30. When the time ended, people stopped mid-sentence, smiled, and said goodbye. No awkward lingering. No pressure to continue. And strangely, that made the conversation feel complete. Respecting the ending respected the people. There's a concept in behavioral science called time boundaries. Clear beginnings and endings increase perceived value. Think about movies, meals, even relationships. When time is respected, experiences feel intentional. That intention boosts memory. Retention, which is crucial for language learning. Your brain remembers what feels purposeful. I started applying this to my English practice. Instead of endless videos, I set a clear start and stop. 20 minutes. Same time. Same place. When the timer ended, I stopped, even if I wanted to continue. Especially if I wanted to continue. This trained my brain to associate English with control. Not exhaustion. Motivation grew naturally. American workplaces operate on this same principle. Meetings have agendas. Calls have end times. This isn't corporate coldness. It's cognitive efficiency. Neuroscience shows that the brain performs better when it knows limits. Open-ended tasks drain energy. Bounded tasks sharpen focus. This cultural habit spills into love and family too. Couples schedule time together. Parents schedule time with kids. It sounds unromantic until you realize how much resentment comes from vague promises. Later is the most dangerous word in a relationship. Americans avoid it by using clocks. I remember a couple telling me, if it's not on the calendar, it's not real. At first, I laughed. Then I noticed how peaceful their home felt. No guessing. No chasing. Time wasn't a battlefield. It was shared ground. For English learners, this is gold. Most people quit because learning feels endless. No finish line. No structure. Just guilt. American punctuality culture quietly solves this by breaking life into manageable units. You don't learn English forever. You learn it today, from 7 to 7:20. SEO experts often talk about consistency as a growth hack. But consistency without time respect is just repetition. What Americans do differently is scheduled consistency. That's what builds mastery, whether in business, relationships, or language. And here's the uncomfortable truth I had to face. When I showed up late to my own English practice, I was telling myself I didn't matter. No wonder my brain resisted. No wonder progress felt heavy. Respecting time is self-respect in a measurable form. Once I adopted this mindset, everything shifted. English wasn't a burden. It was an appointment. And appointments, in American culture, are honored. So if you're watching this video and wondering why your English isn't improving despite effort, ask yourself a different question. Do you respect the language, or do you keep it waiting? Because in America, and in your brain, waiting too long is often how trust is lost. A small love story. Love, in America, doesn't usually announce itself loudly. It shows up on time. That was the first thing that confused me. Back where I came from, love was dramatic, spontaneous, flexible. In the US, love looked scheduled. Calendars. Messages like, dinner Friday at 7. Not, we'll see. At first, I thought this meant less passion. I was wrong. It meant less fear. I noticed this during my third week, when I started spending time with someone who would later become central to my story. Our first real conversation didn't happen by accident. It happened because we agreed on a time, a place. And when that time arrived, neither of us was late. That alone created a strange sense of safety. No guessing. No wondering if I mattered enough to show up for. Your brain reads punctuality as commitment. Neuroscience shows that when expectations are met consistently, the brain releases oxytocin, the same chemical associated with bonding and trust. Romance movies rarely show this, but real attachment depends on it. Americans understand this intuitively. Love isn't proved by intensity. It's proved by reliability. Our dates weren't long. Sometimes just coffee. Sometimes a short walk. But they always had clear edges. Start. End. And because of that, the moments inside felt focused. Phones stayed away. Conversations stayed present. Time wasn't stretched. It was respected. That respect made the connection deeper, not weaker. English learning slipped into these moments naturally. Simple phrases. Clear questions. What time works for you? How long do we have? These weren't cold logistics. They were signals of care. When you ask someone about their time, you're asking about their life. English became emotional, not academic. I realized something important then. Many English learners struggle with listening not because the language is fast, but because their minds are anxious. Love without time. Boundaries creates anxiety. Learning without time boundaries does the same. In both cases, the brain stays alert, scanning for disappointment. That state blocks comprehension. American love culture reduces this anxiety by being explicit. No mind reading. No vague promises. If plans change, they say so early. That honesty protects emotional energy. And protected energy can be invested in conversations, in growth, in language. There was one evening when we planned to meet for exactly 40 minutes. I remember checking the clock, expecting disappointment when it ended. Instead, I felt satisfied. Complete. Behavioral psychologists explain this as temporal closure. When experiences end as expected, the brain files them as positive memories. Those memories build anticipation instead of exhaustion. That night, I went home and listened to English audio at the same hour I always did. For the first time, I noticed I wasn't translating every word. My mind felt calm. Love hadn't distracted me from learning. It had stabilized me. In many cultures, love is used as an excuse to ignore time. In America, time is used to protect love. Couples don't say, "I'm busy. You'll understand." They say, "I can give you 30 minutes now, fully." That fullness matters more than duration. This mindset also prevents resentment. When expectations are clear, disappointment shrinks. Research in relationship psychology confirms this. Unmet expectations cause more emotional damage than conflict itself. Time clarity reduces unmet expectations. Simple. Effective. As our connection grew, so did my respect for this approach. We didn't rush milestones. We scheduled conversations. Difficult ones too. Nothing was postponed indefinitely. Problems didn't grow in the shadows of later. They were given time slots. That felt strange at first. Then it felt liberating. English learning followed the same pattern. I stopped waiting for motivation. I stopped romanticizing long study sessions. I showed up at my time slot. That consistency mirrored the relationship I was building. Both felt steady. Both felt real. There's a myth that structure kills romance. America quietly disproves this every day. Structure removes anxiety. Anxiety is what kills intimacy. The same applies to learning. When English has a place in your schedule, it stops competing with your emotions. It becomes part of your life, not a threat to it. So if you've ever felt lonely while learning English, or guilty for choosing love, work, or family over practice, consider this perspective. You don't need more sacrifice. You need clearer time boundaries. Love and learning can coexist beautifully when time is respected. That small love story taught me something no textbook ever did. Fluency grows in safe environments. And safety is built, minute by minute, by keeping promises to other people and to yourself. Marriage under pressure. Marriage in America doesn't collapse under pressure the way I once imagined. It organizes itself around it. That realization arrived quietly during my 4th week, when I started observing how couples handled stress, not with dramatic conversations at midnight, but with calendars, reminders, and oddly calm voices. At first, it felt unromantic. Then I understood why it worked. In many places, marriage is tested by emotions. In the US, it's tested by logistics. Who picks up the kids? Who cooks on which day? When conversations happen. When they stop. Time isn't the background of marriage here. It's the framework. And frameworks, as engineers and psychologists both agree, are what keep structures from cracking. I remember sitting at a kitchen table one evening, watching a couple discuss a problem. No raised voices. No long speeches. Just one sentence that changed everything for me. We have 20 minutes. Let's focus. That sentence did more for their marriage than any apology could have. It set a boundary. Boundaries reduce fear. Fear is what turns pressure into conflict. Your brain under pressure behaves differently. Cortisol rises. Listening drops. Memory narrows. When conversations are open-ended, the brain feels trapped. But when time is defined, the nervous system relaxes enough to stay present. This isn't opinion. This is basic neurobiology. Americans don't schedule conversations because they lack emotion. They do it because they understand how emotion works under stress. This approach reshaped my view of commitment. Marriage wasn't about endless availability. It was about reliable presence. Showing up when you said you would. Leaving space when promised. That reliability built trust faster than intensity ever could. And trust, once built, absorbs pressure instead of amplifying it. English learning mirrored this pattern perfectly. When my study sessions were vague, I felt guilty. When they were scheduled, I felt calm. Marriage and language both punish chaos and reward structure. That's not coincidence. The same brain learns both. In America, couples often protect time fiercely, not because they are selfish, but because they've learned what happens when time is constantly invaded. Resentment grows quietly. Communication decays. The relationship survives. But joy leaves. Time protection prevents that erosion. I saw this clearly with parents juggling work and family. Their days were segmented. Morning routines. Evening rituals. Even arguments had timing. Not now. Tonight at 8. That phrase wasn't avoidance. It was preservation. It told the brain, this matters, and it will be handled. For someone learning English, this is a powerful lesson. Most people quit because learning feels like an endless argument with themselves. No resolution. No closure. Just pressure. Americans reduce pressure by deciding when effort happens and when it doesn't. That decision alone cuts stress in half. During my 4th week, my own relationship faced a moment of tension. Old habits surfaced. Different expectations. Different emotional rhythms. The instinct was to talk immediately, emotionally, without limits. But America had already taught me another option. We scheduled the conversation. 30 minutes. Walk outside. Phones away. That conversation didn't solve everything. But it didn't damage anything either. It stayed contained. Safe. And afterward, something surprising happened. We both had energy left. Energy to listen. Energy to care. Energy I later used to practice English that same evening, without resistance. Marriage under pressure doesn't need more words. It needs better timing. Relationship researchers consistently find that conflict resolution improves when discussions are time-limited and predictable. The brain stays cooperative. Defensiveness drops. Solutions appear. This is why American marriages often look calm from the outside. Not because they lack problems, but because problems are scheduled, not allowed to roam freely. That discipline protects love from exhaustion. And here's the part that hit me hardest. When you respect time in marriage, you're saying, you matter enough to deserve my focused attention. When you disrespect time, even unintentionally, you say the opposite. The same message applies to yourself when learning English. I had spent years telling myself I wanted fluency, while refusing to give it a protected place in my life. No wonder progress felt fragile. No wonder motivation disappeared under pressure. I was asking my brain to commit without security. America didn't teach me marriage advice. It taught me time literacy. Once I learned that, both my relationship and my learning stabilized. Pressure didn't vanish. It became manageable. So if your life feels heavy, work, love, family, English, all pulling at once, consider this American lesson. Pressure doesn't break you. Undefined time does. Give things a start. Give them an end. Show up inside that space. Then let them rest. Marriage survives pressure. Not by passion alone, but by respecting the clock that holds it together. Family and the clock. If you want to see what Americans truly believe about time, don't look at their offices. Look at their families. That's where the rules become habits. And habits become identity. During my 4th week in the US, I spent more time inside American homes than public spaces, and what I saw quietly rewired my understanding of parenting, family bonds, and why children here seem to grow up with an invisible clock already inside them. The first thing that struck me was how calm mornings felt. Not quiet, busy, yes, but calm. Kids woke up at the same time every day. Breakfast happened within a clear window. Shoes went on. Bags were packed. No shouting. No rushing speeches. Time did most of the talking. The family didn't fight the morning. They flowed through it. This wasn't strictness. It was predictability. And predictability, according to developmental psychology, is one of the strongest foundations for emotional security in children. When kids know what happens next, their brains relax. A relaxed brain learns better, listens better, and resists less. That applies to language learning too, at any age. I watched parents explain schedules to their children with surprising respect. We have 10 minutes. We leave at 8. No threats. No emotional pressure. Just facts. Time wasn't used as punishment. It was used as information. That distinction matters more than most people realize. In families where time is vague, parents repeat themselves constantly. That repetition creates noise. Noise creates stress. Stress reduces listening. American families reduce noise by letting the clock speak. The result is fewer words, more cooperation, and less emotional exhaustion. One afternoon, I saw a child ask, "Can we play more?" The parent checked the time and said, 5 minutes. And 5 minutes later, they stopped, together. No argument. No drama. That ending mattered. When adults keep time promises, children learn trust. Trust reduces resistance. This is backed by attachment theory and decades of child development research. What surprised me most was how this approach extended into emotional life. Family conversations had timing too. Homework time. Screen time. Talk time. Even hugs had rhythm, before school, before bed. Affection wasn't random. It was reliable. And reliability, not intensity, is what builds long-term connection. This rhythm shapes how children relate to learning. Kids who grow up with time boundaries don't associate learning with chaos. They associate it with structure and safety. No wonder American children adapt more easily to scheduled learning environments. Their nervous systems have been trained for it at home. As someone learning English, this hit close to home. I realized I had never given my learning that kind of family-level respect. English was squeezed between fatigue and distraction. No wonder my brain treated it like background noise. Families don't grow strong in the background. Neither does language. In American homes, dinner time stood out most. Phones away. Start time respected. End time honored. Conversations flowed, because there was no rush and no uncertainty. Studies show that shared meals with predictable timing improve language development in children. Adults are no different. Language grows where attention is protected. I began to understand why Americans often say, "We'll be home by 6." That sentence isn't about control. It's about care. It tells the family system when to relax, when to connect, when to expect each other. Time becomes emotional infrastructure. For learners watching this video, especially parents, this matters deeply. If your home treats time as chaotic, learning will feel chaotic too. You don't need more discipline. You need clearer rhythms. Even 15 minutes at the same hour can change how the brain responds to English. During that week, I visited a family with young children. English books were read every night at the same time. Not long. Not perfect. Just consistent. The kids didn't resist. Their brains expected it. Expectation removes friction. Friction is what makes learning painful. The science is clear here. Habit formation strengthens when cues are consistent. Time is the strongest cue we have. American families use it intuitively. They don't explain neuroscience to their kids. They live it. This approach also protects parents. When time is structured, guilt decreases. Parents don't feel like they're constantly failing. They know what fits today and what doesn't. That emotional clarity spreads through the household. I carried this lesson back into my own life immediately. I stopped treating English as an optional extra and started treating it like family time, with a start, an end, and respect. The resistance disappeared. Not because English got easier, but because my brain felt safer. So if you're learning English and wondering why motivation keeps collapsing, look beyond apps and methods. Look at how your life treats time. Families don't bond by accident. They bond by showing up when promised. America taught me that children don't learn respect for time through lectures. They absorb it through rhythm. And once that rhythm exists, any learning, has somewhere to live. Time doesn't steal family life. It holds it together. English through real life. I used to believe that English lived inside textbooks. In America, I discovered it lives inside moments, and those moments are almost always scheduled. This realization arrived quietly, sometime between my morning coffee and an afternoon walk, when I noticed how little English people wasted. Words were chosen to move life forward, not decorate it. And suddenly, listening became easier. In real American life, English is not performed. It's used. Short. Clear. Time-aware. People don't talk just to talk. They talk to coordinate, confirm, and connect within a time frame. I have 5 minutes. Let's finish this by noon. Call me at 7. These sentences sound simple, but they carry structure. And structure is exactly what a language learner's brain needs. During my weeks there, I barely studied English in the traditional sense. Instead, I lived inside it. Grocery runs. School drop-offs. Casual greetings timed perfectly between tasks. English appeared in predictable windows, and my brain started recognizing patterns without effort. This is called contextual learning. The brain absorbs language faster when it's tied to real actions and clear timing. Neuroscience explains why this works. The brain prioritizes information that helps it navigate the world efficiently. When English helped me arrive on time, avoid mistakes, or connect smoothly, my brain tagged it as valuable. Valuable information sticks. Random vocabulary doesn't. I noticed that Americans rarely over-explain. They trust shared time. Awareness to fill gaps. If someone says, "We'll talk later," both parties often know when later is. That shared understanding reduces cognitive load. Less guessing. Less anxiety. Better listening. For language learners, anxiety is the real enemy, not grammar. Anxiety speeds up internal dialogue, drowning out incoming sounds. In America, the clarity around time lowered my anxiety. And my listening improved naturally. I wasn't trying harder. I was calmer. One day, I realized I was thinking in English during transitions, walking from one place to another, waiting briefly, preparing to leave. These were micromoments, often ignored by learners. But in American life, micromoments are respected. They are not filled with chaos. They are used intentionally. That's where English quietly settled in my mind. This aligns with research on distributed practice. Learning in short, frequent bursts tied to real-life cues builds stronger memory than long, isolated sessions. Americans live this principle daily. Their lives are divided into manageable time blocks, and language slips into those blocks effortlessly. I stopped forcing long study sessions. Instead, I paired English with existing routines. Morning news at the same time. Short listening while cooking dinner. A quick review before an evening walk. The clock became my teacher. Consistency did the rest. What surprised me most was how English felt less foreign when it respected my time. I wasn't overwhelmed. I wasn't behind. I was on schedule. That psychological shift mattered more than any method I had tried before. American English also sounded slower than I expected, not in speed, but in intention. Pauses were meaningful. Silence wasn't awkward. Conversations breathed. This pacing helped my comprehension. When time is respected, speech becomes clearer. People don't rush to fill space. They trust the moment. I realized that many learners struggle because they treat English as an emergency. Something urgent, always overdue. Americans treat it as infrastructure. Something that supports daily life quietly. That mindset removes pressure. SEO experts talk about learning like a native. This is what they mean, even if they don't say it. Natives don't cram. They live. And their lives are structured by time. Once I aligned my learning with real-life timing, progress stopped feeling like progress. It felt like living. English wasn't a project. It was a companion. So if you're watching this and wondering why apps, courses, and motivation tricks haven't worked, consider this. Are you learning English in isolation, or are you letting it enter your real life at predictable times? America taught me that fluency grows where life is organized. Respect the clock, and the language will meet you there. The brain and focus. Imagine trying to listen to English while your brain is constantly checking the door, the clock, and your phone at the same time. That's not a focus problem. That's a survival problem. During my weeks in America, I finally understood why my concentration improved without effort. My brain stopped feeling hunted by time. And once that happened, focus returned like a natural reflex. Your brain has one main job, to keep you safe. Learning only happens when safety is present. Neuroscience is very clear about this. When your brain senses uncertainty, it shifts resources away from memory and comprehension toward vigilance. You don't learn a language in that state. You scan. You worry. You quit. This is why so many motivated learners still fail. In American life, time structure creates psychological safety. When you know when something starts and ends, your brain relaxes. The amygdala, the brain's threat detector, calms down. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for focus, planning, and language processing, comes back online. This isn't mindset. It's biology. I felt this shift clearly during week 4. My days had rhythm. Morning tasks. Afternoon work. Evening quiet. English listening happened at the same hour every day. Same chair. Same light. My brain began preparing for English before I even pressed play. That preparation is called anticipatory focus, the brain's ability to allocate attention ahead of time. And it's powerful. Research in cognitive psychology shows that focus improves dramatically when activities occur at predictable times. The brain forms time-based cues. Just like you feel sleepy at night, your brain can feel ready for English. Americans unknowingly leverage this by structuring their days tightly. Focus becomes a habit, not a struggle. This explains why Americans can appear relaxed while being productive. They are not forcing focus. They are entering it. Their environment signals when to work and when to rest. Constant decision-making disappears. Less mental noise means deeper attention. Before America, my English sessions were chaotic. Sometimes long. Sometimes skipped. Always guilty. Guilt is poison to focus. It activates stress responses that fragment attention. No wonder listening felt exhausting. I was asking my brain to perform while under threat. In the US, that threat faded. Not because life was easier, but because time was clearer. Clear time boundaries reduce what scientists call decision fatigue. Fewer decisions free up cognitive resources. Those resources can then be used for learning. I started noticing that my listening comprehension improved even on difficult content. Accents felt slower. Sentences felt shorter. Nothing had changed in the audio. My brain had changed. Focus sharpened perception. This is supported by research on attentional bandwidth. When stress is high, bandwidth narrows. When safety increases, bandwidth widens. Language requires wide bandwidth, tracking sounds, meaning, context, and emotion simultaneously. You can't do that while anxious. Americans also protect focus socially. Meetings start and end on time. Interruptions are minimized. Multitasking is discouraged during conversations. These norms protect attention as a shared resource. Focus isn't individual effort. It's collective agreement. I brought this lesson directly into my English routine. Phone away. Timer set. Door closed. 20 minutes. When the timer ended, I stopped, even mid-interest. That ending mattered. Endings teach the brain to trust the container. Trust increases willingness to return. Many learners think focus means pushing harder. In reality, focus means removing threats. America showed me that the biggest threat isn't difficulty. It's uncertainty. When will this end? How long should I do this? Am I doing enough? Those questions drain attention. Once time answered those questions, my brain stopped asking them. Focus became available. There's also a deeper layer here. The brain encodes memories better when attention is stable. This is called consolidation. Short, focused sessions consolidate better than long, distracted ones. Americans build their lives around short, focused blocks. Language learning benefits. Automatically. I noticed vocabulary sticking without repetition. Phrases resurfacing days later. That wasn't magic. That was consolidation working properly. If you're struggling with English listening, ask yourself honestly, is your brain safe when you study? Or is it counting minutes, worrying about other tasks, feeling behind? If it's the second, focus will always feel out of reach. America didn't teach me how to focus. It removed the conditions that made focus impossible. Respecting time is not about being strict. It's about telling your brain, you're safe here. You know when this ends. Once your brain believes that, it gives you its full attention. And attention, not talent, is what turns sound into understanding. Why learners lose motivation. Most people don't quit learning English because it's too hard. They quit because it feels endless. During my time in America, this truth became impossible to ignore. I met smart, capable people, immigrants, students, even professionals, who all said the same thing. I just lost motivation. But when I listened carefully, motivation wasn't the real issue. Time was. Motivation dies fastest in environments with no clear finish line. The human brain needs closure the way lungs need oxygen. Without it, effort turns into fatigue. In psychology, this is called learned helplessness, when repeated effort, without visible progress, convinces the brain that trying is pointless. Many English learners live in this state without realizing it. Before coming to the US, my English routine had no shape. I studied when I could. I stopped when I was tired. Sometimes I studied for an hour. Sometimes not at all. There was no rhythm. No boundary. My brain never knew what to expect, so it never prepared itself. Over time, enthusiasm faded, not because I didn't care, but because my nervous system was exhausted. In America, I saw a different pattern. People didn't rely on motivation. They relied on systems. Motivation was considered unreliable, weather-dependent, mood-dependent, energy-dependent. Systems were stable. Time slots. Calendars. Reminders. That stability protected motivation, instead of demanding it. Neuroscience explains this clearly. Motivation is regulated by dopamine, a chemical released when the brain anticipates reward. But dopamine spikes when progress is predictable, not when effort is chaotic. If your brain can't predict when effort will end or what success looks like, dopamine drops. You feel bored, resistant, or numb. That's not laziness. That's chemistry. This is why so many learners start strong and quit quietly. They begin with excitement, then face unclear timelines, vague goals, and inconsistent practice. The brain stops seeing value. Motivation collapses. In American learning culture, especially in professional settings, this problem is solved through time boxing. You don't work until it's done. You work until time is done. That distinction is everything. Time boxing gives the brain certainty. Certainty restores motivation. When I applied this to English, something surprising happened. Even on days I felt tired, I still showed up. Not because I was inspired, but because the commitment was small and finite. 15 minutes. That's it. The brain can tolerate almost anything for 15 minutes if it knows the pain will end. Behavioral scientists call this temporal discounting. Short-term effort feels lighter when the endpoint is visible. Americans design their lives around visible endpoints. Meetings end. Classes end. Workdays end. Learning sessions end. That's why burnout is lower than outsiders expect. Another motivation killer I noticed was emotional guilt. Many learners feel ashamed when they miss a day. That shame triggers avoidance. Avoidance kills consistency. Americans handle missed sessions differently. They reset. No drama. No self-attack. Tomorrow has its own slot. This emotional neutrality around time is powerful. It keeps the brain engaged instead of defensive. When I missed an English session, I didn't spiral. I simply returned at the next scheduled time. Motivation didn't need to be rebuilt. It was waiting. I also realized how comparison destroys motivation. Watching others progress faster, speak better, sound more fluent, it hurts. In America, progress is often measured against time invested, not against other people. How long have you been working on this? That question changes everything. It reframes progress as a process, not a competition. Research on motivation confirms this. Intrinsic motivation grows when effort is self-referenced and time-bound. Extrinsic comparison drains it. American culture, with its obsession with schedules, accidentally supports intrinsic motivation by focusing on consistency over speed. My lowest point as a learner wasn't when English was difficult. It was when it felt pointless. America removed that feeling by giving effort a container. Inside that container, even small progress felt real. If you're watching this video and thinking about quitting, pause for a moment. Ask yourself one honest question. Have you been asking your brain to run a marathon with no map, no finish line, and no rest stops? If yes, quitting isn't failure. It's self-protection. You don't need more motivation. You need clearer time boundaries. Motivation follows structure, not the other way around. America taught me that people don't lose motivation because they are weak. They lose it because they are tired of wandering. Give your effort a schedule, and your brain will follow. A turning point. Turning points rarely arrive with fireworks. Mine arrived on an ordinary Tuesday evening, exactly at 7 p.m., because that's when it was scheduled. That detail matters more than you might think. Nothing emotional pushed me there. No surge of motivation. Just a quiet agreement with myself to show up. And for the first time in years, everything stopped fighting back. Up until that point, learning English had always felt like dragging a heavy suitcase uphill. Love felt complicated. Family responsibilities felt endless. Time felt hostile. I believed something dramatic needed to change. More discipline, better methods, stronger willpower. America taught me the opposite. Nothing dramatic changes until something small becomes consistent. That evening, I didn't sit down to improve my English. I sat down because it was 7. That was it. No expectations. No pressure. 20 minutes on the timer. When the audio started, my brain didn't resist. It recognized the moment. This was the turning point, not because I felt inspired, but because my nervous system felt safe. Neuroscience calls this state-dependent learning. When the brain enters the same emotional and environmental state repeatedly, learning accelerates. My brain had finally learned that English time was not dangerous. Not endless, not overwhelming. It had an edge. A start. An end. That predictability unlocked attention in a way no technique ever had. What surprised me most was how this small change rippled outward. Conversations in my relationship felt calmer. I listened better, not just to English, but to people. When time is respected, listening improves everywhere. The brain stops rushing ahead. It stays. Marriage conversations became shorter and more effective. Family moments felt fuller. I wasn't mentally elsewhere, counting tasks. My English sessions no longer competed with my life. They fit inside it. That fit changed everything. There's strong psychological evidence for this. When habits align with identity rather than ambition, they stick. America quietly shifted my identity. From someone trying to learn English to someone who shows up at 7. The behavior didn't feel heroic. It felt normal. And normal is sustainable. I also noticed something else at that turning point. Mistakes stopped scaring me. When time is limited, mistakes lose their drama. There's always tomorrow's slot. This reduced my fear of speaking. Fear blocks fluency faster than any grammar error. Once fear dropped, words flowed. I stopped measuring progress emotionally. No more, I feel better today. Instead, I measured it temporally. Did I show up? Yes or no? That binary simplicity freed my mind. Progress became inevitable, not emotional. Behavioral scientists call this process-based success. You don't chase outcomes. You repeat processes. Americans live this daily, often without naming it. They trust systems more than moods. That trust compounds. My turning point wasn't about learning faster. It was about quitting the internal negotiation. No more asking, should I study today? The decision was already made by the clock. Decision fatigue disappeared. Energy returned. And here's the part most people miss. This change didn't just improve my English. It healed my relationship with time itself. Time stopped feeling like an enemy stealing my life. It became a structure holding it together. I saw this reflected in American families, marriages, workplaces, everywhere. People weren't happier because life was easier. They were calmer because life was scheduled. Calm brains learn. Calm relationships last. Calm learners persist. If you're watching this video and waiting for your own turning point, I want to be honest with you. It probably won't feel big. It won't announce itself. It will look boring, predictable, almost disappointing. But that's the point. Turning points that rely on emotion fade. Turning points built on time endure. You don't need to change your personality. You don't need more motivation. You don't need to wait until life is less busy. Americans don't wait. They decide when something belongs, and then they protect that time. The moment you do that, learning English stops being a struggle. It becomes a habit. And habits, unlike motivation, don't argue with you. My turning point happened at 7 o'clock on an ordinary evening. Yours can happen the same way. Not because you feel ready, but because the clock says it's time. That's when progress quietly becomes permanent. When progress becomes invisible. There's a strange moment in long-term learning when progress stops feeling exciting. Not because it's gone, but because it's working. This phase confused me more than the beginning. Early on, every new word felt like a victory. Every sentence understood felt loud. But somewhere after the turning point, improvement became quiet. Almost invisible. And for a while, I thought I was doing something wrong. This is the stage where most learners quit. In the American learning mindset, this phase has a name, even if people don't always say it out loud: the plateau of competence. It's when growth no longer gives you emotional rewards, but it continues structurally. Your brain is rewiring, automating, smoothing edges, but it doesn't celebrate anymore. It just works. At first, that silence felt uncomfortable. I was used to emotional feedback, excitement, frustration, pride. Now there was calm. English no longer felt hard, but it also didn't feel thrilling. I could listen without panic. I could speak without rehearsing every word. And that normality made me suspicious. Here's the truth most YouTube videos won't tell you: if learning still feels dramatic, it's probably unstable. Real progress feels boring. Americans understand this deeply. You see it in how they approach fitness, careers, relationships. The goal isn't constant excitement. The goal is reliability. When something becomes reliable, it fades into the background of life, and that's when it lasts. My English sessions didn't disappear. They just stopped demanding attention. I'd sit down at 7, listen, speak, repeat, and stand up 20 minutes later without thinking about it. No internal debate. No emotional check-in. Just execution. This is where fluency actually forms. From a cognitive perspective, this stage is critical. The brain moves skills from conscious processing to automatic processing. That shift frees mental energy. It's why you can drive a car and have a conversation at the same time. It's why native speakers don't think about grammar. Automation is the goal, not excitement. But automation feels invisible. I remember asking myself, am I still improving? Then one night, I noticed something subtle. I laughed at a joke in English, without translating it. No pause. No effort. Just laughter. That moment wasn't loud. But it was real. Another day, I explained a problem to someone without planning my sentences. The words arrived already assembled. That's when I understood. Progress hadn't stopped. It had sunk deeper. This is also where many learners sabotage themselves. They add new methods. Change routines. Chase novelty. They mistake boredom for stagnation. Americans, on the other hand, tend to trust systems longer. They stay with what works, even when it stops feeling special. In relationships, this mindset is powerful. Long marriages don't survive on constant passion. They survive on consistency. Showing up. Listening. Repeating small acts. Learning English is no different. During this phase, I stopped counting vocabulary. I stopped testing myself emotionally. I focused only on one question: did I show up today? If the answer was yes, the system was intact. And something unexpected happened. Confidence grew, not loud confidence, but quiet certainty. I no longer felt the need to prove my English. I used it when needed and forgot about it when not. That's real integration. American culture rewards this kind of confidence. Not the kind that announces itself, but the kind that functions under pressure. When you're no longer thinking about the skill, you can use it fully. This invisibility also changes your identity. You stop being a learner. You become a user. English becomes a tool, not a project. And tools don't demand emotions. They just work. If you're in this phase right now, let me reassure you, this is not a problem. This is the goal. If learning feels quiet, repetitive, almost dull, you're doing it right. The biggest danger here is quitting out of impatience. Growth hasn't slowed. Your awareness of growth has. That's a sign of maturity, not failure. In American productivity psychology, there's a saying, if you can't see progress, check your calendar, not your feelings. Time reveals what emotions hide. Weeks pass. Months stack. And one day, someone speaks to you in English faster than usual, and you keep up. Not perfectly, but naturally. That's when you realize, the invisible work worked. So don't chase excitement. Don't reset your system just to feel something. Stay boring. Stay consistent. Trust the process. Because when progress becomes invisible, it has usually become permanent. And permanence, unlike motivation, doesn't disappear when life gets busy. If you're still listening right now, something probably clicked. Learning English doesn't fail because you're not smart. It fails because we keep chasing motivation instead of building structure. Americans aren't better than you. They just stopped asking, do I feel like doing this today? And started asking, is it time? That single question changes everything. You don't hear English better because you're talented. You hear it better because you showed up, even on boring days. And that's why most people quit. If you've ever listened to English but couldn't stay focused, understood the words but froze when speaking, started learning again and again, then stopped, secretly believed English just isn't for you, then here's the uncomfortable truth. English was never the problem. Time was. How you respect it. How you protect it. And how you use it, even when no one is watching. In the next video, I'll reveal one silent mistake that over 90% of English learners make. It's the reason you can understand English, but still can't speak naturally. The scary part. You might be making this mistake right now, without realizing it. If you want to train your ears like a native speaker. Think in English without translating. Build real fluency slowly, calmly, and permanently. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. This channel isn't for people who want English fast. It's for people who want English to last. Stay with me. Your English doesn't need to be louder. It just needs to stay with you. Subscribe, because the next video might be the one you wish you had found years ago.